Hello, my friends of the Psychedelic Renaissance. It's Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, here to once again wrestle with the deepest mysteries from our entheogenic past. So, as a fellow dressed in a white button-down shirt, a black tie, all while holding a Bible, once said to me, I'd like to talk to you about Jesus. Assuming Jesus did exist as a real historical figure raises an interesting question. Did this first century healer know anything about psychedelic plant medicines? Now let me just say right at the outset that there is absolutely no direct evidence that supports that claim. However, there is some very interesting ancillary evidence that might point in that direction. Jesus is referred to as a healer over 40 times in the New Testament. And so we might ask ourselves, what kind of medicines would a healer living in the greater Palestinian area in the first century use on their patients? Now, while a physician in those days might use any number of techniques to heal their patient, there were two plant medicines that were actually revered by the ancient Hebrews, and they are cannabis and mandrake. Let's start with cannabis. Several passages in the Old Testament make reference to a plant called Kaneh Bosm, which was an important ingredient for the holy anointing oil of the high priests. Until the early 20th century, Kaneh Bosm had been translated as calamus, which is a marshy, reed-like plant. That changed in 1936 when Polish anthropologist Sula Bennett showed rather conclusively that Kaneh Bosm was not calamus, but rather cannabis. In more recent years, a whole other Bennett, Chris Bennett, has added more support to this claim in books like Cannabis and the Soma Solution and Liber 420, where he provides additional evidence showing that Sula Bennett was in fact correct. Therefore, if Jesus really were familiar with the Old Testament, and there's some pretty good evidence that he was, then he would have known exactly what Kaneh Bosm was and how to use it entheogenically. Let's turn now to that other, equally prized psychedelic plant medicine of the ancient world, mandrake. Mandrake is a member of the Solanaceae family of plants. Along with henbane, belladonna, and datura, mandrake has been used for thousands of years in medicine, in witches' brews, and in magical ointments. Now, while all of these psychedelic solanaceous plants were employed in the ancient world for things like medicine, magic, religion, or recreation, only the mandrake had a very special quality attributed to it, and that is its ability to cast out demons. One of JC's specialties! For example, one old legend holds that King Solomon kept a mandrake root in his ring so that he could draw demons out from the possessed. Additionally, the historian Josephus, who was born only a few years after Jesus was executed, if Jesus existed at all, has this to say in his book, The Antiquities of the Jews. He writes, Mandrake drives away those called demons, which are none other than the spirits of the wicked. Therefore, when we read in the New Testament that Jesus cast out demons, we are left with two possibilities. Either Jesus was the only begotten, all-powerful Son of the one true God, and look, if that's your thing, I'm not here to knock anybody's beliefs, and that's cool. I just think that there's a better, more pragmatic historical explanation, which is the second possibility, and that's that Jesus simply used the same plant medicines that everybody who casts out demons in his day used. And that would be the highly psychedelic mandrake. Therefore, when we read in Mark chapter 6 verse 13 that Jesus' disciples drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them, well, they very well could have been using a mandrake ointment to do that. Now, it's also possible, as Chris Bennett has pointed out, that Jesus taught his disciples how to actually make the holy anointing oil of the high priests, and it was the Kaneh Bosm or cannabis ointment that the disciples went out and healed people with. It could really go either way. Now, this all raises another interesting question. None of the disciples were doctors. So where exactly did they learn how to make these medical ointments? They had to have learned how to do it from Jesus himself. Meaning that if Jesus really did exist and there is some truth to these stories, then he did know something about psychedelic plant medicines and how to actually mix them into medicines and how to use them entheogenically. To conclude, If Jesus really existed and really was a rabbi and really was a healer and really had disciples who really knew how to make ointments that really healed people, then I think it's safe to assume that Jesus would have known at least a little something about plant medicines of his day, especially plant medicines like cannabis and mandrake, which had been revered by Jews for centuries. Cannabis in its inclusion in the holy anointing oil, and mandrake for its ability to cast out demons. Well, my friends of the Psychedelic Renaissance, that's all I have for you today, and like always, I'd love to thank you for stopping by. Please like, share, and subscribe this video and my page, and let's spread the truth about psychedelic history as far as we can. Don't forget to hit the little bell icon so you can be notified every time a new video is posted. Until that day, I'm Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, reminding you that you free your mind by using your brain. Peace.